So we have to start with the lesson from the Hudson River. Captain Sully, Sullenberger, First Officer Jeffrey Skiles, U.S. Airways Flight 1549.
It's an event that's just etched in public memory. But we need to zoom past the spectacular landing and focus on the specific procedural details of those final few minutes.
The nuts and bolts of what happened in the cockpit.
Absolutely. So it's January 15, 2009. The Airbus A320 is climbing out of LaGuardia. Sullenberger's the captain, highly experienced. His first officer, Skiles, is a veteran pilot, but he's actually pretty new to this specific aircraft type, the A320.
So it's a routine climb out, gray winter sky, and then it happens.
The critical moment. They're at about 2,800 feet, just 90 seconds into the flight, and the plane flies directly into a massive flock of Canada geese.
The sounds they described were just horrific. Loud thuds, the plane shuddering, the smell of burning birds.
And then the silence. Total catastrophic power loss. They suffered a rapid dual-engine failure.
Now, in that moment, time just collapses.
It does. Investigators measured the total time from that bird strike to the moment the plane touched down on the Hudson River. It was just 208 seconds.
208 seconds, that's less than 4 minutes.
Less than 4 minutes to process what happened, declare an emergency, talk to air traffic control, consider these irreversible decisions.
Can we make it back to LaGuardia? What about Teterboro Airport?
While executing procedures that were designed for a totally different scenario.
Okay, so here is the hinge moment for our whole discussion today. Sullenberger's first move is to tell Skiles to start the emergency checklist for a dual engine loss.
Right, the procedure, the written plan that all pilots live by.
But this is where the system immediately slams into reality.
It does, because the checklist they had, the one for dual engine loss, it's designed for a plane gliding at, say, 30,000 feet.
It assumes you have time.
It assumes you have maybe 10, 15, even 20 minutes to troubleshoot, try to restart the engines, coordinate your options.
And they had.
208 seconds.
Yeah.
And they were falling fast over the most densely populated area in the entire United States.
So if the written procedure is built for a scenario they don't have time for, why even bother with the list? Wouldn't you just trust your gut? Your raw pilot skill?
That's the question, right? That's what I hear when people dismiss planning. They say, just trust your instincts.
And that's what the NTSB, the investigators, had to answer. And it's what Sully himself clarified later.
They had all these choices swirling around them. The alarms were blaring, the radio was crackling, and their plane was effectively a high-speed glider.
Yet, Scoodles worked the list.
And why? What was Sully's reasoning for that?
Sullenberger said that Scoodles worked the list because, and this is the insight we have to anchor to, paper is stable.
Stability in chaos.
The list provided an anchor. It externalized the process that his highly stressed brain could no longer reliably hold on to.
But here's the critical insight, the part that applies to every single to-do list you will ever write.
It's Sullenberger's later confirmation. They only got through the first page of a 3-page checklist.
Wow. So they didn't finish it. They didn't even come close.
Not at all. They were successful because they ruthlessly prioritized those first critical actions, knowing they couldn't possibly execute the entire document.
When we picture success with a to-do list, we picture the entire thing checked off. Clean slate. Exactly. And Sullenberger shows us that under catastrophic pressure, and look, a deadline moved up or a kid getting sick is a catastrophe for your focus.
Yeah.
You don't win by completing the whole list.
You win by completing the most important steps flawlessly.
This is what we're calling the principle of hierarchy, or, as Sullenberger called it, load shedding. The NTSB report praised their skill, of course, but it also heavily highlighted that the design of the checklist itself is critical when time is limited.
And that is the absolute antidote to the long, flat list trap that we all fall into.
We do. Most of us write lists where, Email Brenda has the exact same visual and psychological weight as finalize the Q3 budget.
They just sit there on the same level and the list is whispering to you, do everything. And because you can't, you freeze. Or you just thrash around doing easy, low-impact tasks to feel like you're moving.
So we have to design a built-in hierarchy, a system that keeps us effective even when our cognitive capacity starts to degrade.
It means adopting 2 distinct layers.
Layer 1 is the first page, the mission-critical items. This has to be strictly limited, 1 to 5 actions, tops. These are the things that prevent the worst outcome or deliver the single highest point of leverage for the day.
If the day gets wrecked, this is all you commit to doing. You have to defend this page.
And then layer 2 is everything else, the rest, the optimization. This is the helpful, valuable work the nice-to-haves.
But it's not what saves the day.
It's not. Load shedding in your professional life means actively and consciously ignoring those layer 2 distractions to execute layer 1 exceptionally well. It's an act of necessary professional neglect.
So if you look at your list right now and you could only get 3 items done, but they were the most important 3, would your day still be a success?
If the answer is yes, then those 3 tasks belong on your first page. That's the core aviation wisdom we need to apply every single Monday morning.
That concept, standardizing steps and enforcing them even when they seem painfully obvious, that leads us directly into our next high-stakes lesson.
Using the list as a safety contract.
And for that, we go to the intensive care unit.
We're going to Johns Hopkins Hospital in Baltimore. And looking at the work of a physician named Peter Pronovost in the early 2000s, he observed this tragic, silent epidemic.
Bloodstream infections from central lines.
Exactly. These are catheters. They're threaded into major veins. They're life-saving tools for delivering medicine or measuring pressure. But if they introduce bacteria, they become a source of deadly systemic infection.
And the old response, the kind of bureaucratic response, was a sort of learned helplessness, right? These infections, they're called clabicides, were just treated as an inevitable part of modern medicine.
They happen. But the science.
Yeah.
The science knew the prevention steps. The problem wasn't a lack of knowledge.
It was reliable execution.
Pronovost was brilliant because he refused to treat these infections as a moral failure of the staff. He didn't blame the doctors or nurses. He treated it as a design failure of the system itself.
Because in the churn of an ICU, the alarms, the competing emergencies, the hierarchy, the fatigue, existing knowledge just couldn't compete with the mental load.
And you get that deadly phrase, "I've done this 1,000 times," which means steps were being skipped.
So what was his solution?
He designed a ridiculously simple checklist, just 5 basic behaviors for inserting a central line. Steps so fundamental they felt, frankly, almost insulting to the highly trained staff.
What was on it?
Things like wash hands, clean the patient's skin with chlorhexidine, wear sterile gear mask, hat, gown, gloves, drapes. Choose a safer placement when possible. And, crucially, remove the line as soon as it's no longer needed.
So the list itself,
Yeah.
it was just 5 steps. It would take maybe 2 minutes to go through.
The revolution wasn't the content. It was the cultural requirement that Pronovost instituted around that list.
This is the amazing part.
He mandated an almost impolite requirement. He said any member of the care team, a junior nurse, the lowest-ranking person in the room, could issue an immediate stop-now order if a single step was skipped or if the doctor was rushing.
Wait, let's just pause on that for a second. That is a massive cultural shift in an environment that is defined by a very steep hierarchy.
It is. A checklist, a simple piece of paper, it essentially leveled the playing field. It gave everyone explicit permission to override the authority of rank in favor of the authority of the procedure.
The paper had more authority than the ego.
It absolutely did. The checklist became a shared contract that put patient safety above the seniority of the physician. There's a story of a nurse stopping a senior resident who had forgotten to drape the patient. The resident bristled at first,
Of course.
but the system backed the nurse. That is the true power of this procedure.
And the outcome, what was the measurable result of this change?
The results are just staggering. In the Michigan Keystone ICU project, which included 103 ICUs, they found that these infections weren't just reduced. In many facilities, they were nearly eliminated during follow-up,
Eliminated.
saving thousands of lives and millions of dollars.
Yeah.
A simple 5-step list that cost almost nothing to implement was more effective than decades of advanced medical research on its own.
So a list, which felt insulting in its simplicity, saved lives because it made critical actions repeatable under immense pressure. This brings us to the principle of reliability.
And this is how it applies to you. A good list isn't a suggestion box. It's not a storage bin for your ambition. It's a dedicated reliability tool designed to protect your performance when your performance degrades.
And it works in 3 core ways. The first is externalizing memory.
Just like we saw with First Officer Scales. Humans forget under cognitive load. This is not a character flaw. It's a physiological reality. When you offload those steps onto a checklist, you reduce the intense mental effort of holding the procedure in your working memory.
Your list is there to fight your cognitive load.
Second, it's about forcing sequencing. The list establishes a clear order, a standard. In complex systems, whether it's medicine or a huge project rollout, the ultimate enemy isn't ignorance. It's omission. It's skipping a step because you're rushing or distracted.
The checklist forces you through the sequence. You eliminate the dropped ball.
And third, And maybe most powerfully, it's about changing communication. As Pronovost proved, the list created a culture where junior staff could question senior staff.
For you as an individual, the list is your contract with your future self. It lets you call a hard stop on yourself when you notice you're rushing or cutting corners.
The paper holds the standard for quality, even when your internal desire is just to get it done fast.
If a simple 5-step list can nearly eliminate deadly infections, your everyday list can absolutely reduce the smaller infections in your professional life.
Dropped balls, sloppy handoffs, missed follow-ups, and that constant energy-draining background hum of, I know I'm forgetting something.
This concept of letting a written procedure stabilize performance under pressure, it leads us perfectly into the idea of recovery. How do you use a list not just to prevent failure, but to recover from a total collapse?
And that takes us to part 2, reboot by procedure using lists for cognitive clarity.
Okay, for this segment, we are leaving Earth's atmosphere entirely. We're going to deep space, April 1970, with the Apollo 13 mission.
A mission that starts as a routine trip to the moon and very quickly shifts into a frantic, high-stakes survival mission.
After an oxygen tank explodes, crippling the service module.
And this instantly becomes the ultimate low-capacity environment. The crew gym level, Jack Swigert, Fred Hayes, they are exhausted, they are cold, they are operating on pure adrenaline.
They're forced to move into the lunar module, the Aquarius, using it as a cold, cramped lifeboat.
And they're rationing everything, power, water, heat, rationing it to the absolute bare minimum just to survive the long journey back to Earth.
So the immediate crisis, the explosion itself, is over. But the procedural crisis is just beginning.
Right. To get home, the command module, Odyssey, that's the capsule with the heat shield, it has to be powered back up for re-entry. And it had been totally powered down to conserve every last drop of battery power.
And this is where the genius of the list comes in. Because powering up the Odyssey isn't like flipping a switch.
Not at all. It means restoring this massive, intertwined web of critical systems. You've got guidance, navigation, communications, life support. All of it has to come back online in the exact right, almost surgical order.
Why was the order so critical?
Because of the absolute constraint they were under. Power. They had so little of it. If they powered up the wrong system first or tried to pull too much current too fast,
They could brown out the remaining batteries?
if those batteries died, they would lose the critical systems they needed to hit that narrow re-entry corridor back on Earth. One wrong sequence could be fatal.
So Houston couldn't solve this with a single stroke of genius or some big motivational speech?
No, they solved it with paper. They didn't demand heroics from the exhausted, freezing crew in space.
Instead, Mission Control, operating under almost equal pressure on the ground, worked for days to build a reactivation plan.
A step-by-step checklist. They had to figure out how to restore power using less than 15 amps of battery power. They physically replicated the conditions in simulators on the ground, creating a procedure line by line.
And then they read it up to the crew.
And this is a procedure that normally took hours of prep time on the ground. They had to execute it quickly, freezing and exhausted. The key detail here isn't the explosion or the splashdown. It's that moment when the exhausted crew stopped relying on mental fortitude and started trusting the written sequence.
They restored the system by procedure.
And this brings us to the principle of procedure in your daily life. A to-do list isn't just for getting more done. Sometimes its most important job is getting yourself back online.
I think most people treat an energy crash, that feeling of being scattered, overwhelmed, you've lost momentum. They treat it like a personal failure. I should be able to focus. Why can't I just power through?
Well, that just compounds the problem, right? You add shame on top of the exhaustion. Apollo 13 gives us the counter model.
When your internal resources are limited, your focus, your energy, your motivation, you don't demand heroics from your brain.
You reduce the demand on your brain by giving it a written sequence, a series of simple checks. You reboot your system with the smallest, most reliable set of steps.
So we need a personal reactivation checklist for normal life.
Absolutely. A pre-written, non-negotiable sequence for those scattered moments. When you come back to your desk after a crisis, or you're restarting after a bad week, or re-entering a long-abandoned project.
The list says, don't try to solve the whole problem, just follow step 1.
The contrast here is so powerful. The default habit is waiting until you feel ready or motivated. And that feeling often never arrives, so you stay stuck.
The better habit is following a written restart sequence, which makes you become ready just by executing the next small action. The procedure itself creates the momentum.
You know, Gene Kranz's famous statement, Spaceflight will never tolerate carelessness, incapacity, and neglect. That wasn't just a call for
It
toughness.
was a deep respect for
Yeah,
reality.
exactly. High-stakes work punishes missing steps. Your life might not be a spacecraft, but the mechanism is the same. Under stress, your error rate goes way up. A pre-written list is an immediate way to lower that error rate and prevent catastrophic omission.
So when your capacity is low, your list must become smaller, clearer, and much more procedural.
And speaking of clarity and procedural thinking, we can actually look back centuries to find a foundational example of this.
Using a list for cognitive offloading, and that takes us to Benjamin Franklin and his little book.
Franklin, in 18th century Philadelphia, was the definition of an ambitious polymath. Printer, inventor, statesman, I mean, the list goes on.
But he was also painfully aware of his own lack of consistent order.
He was. He dedicated himself to mastering 13 virtues, and he confessed that out of all of them, the virtue of order gave him the most trouble. So he built a practical, highly procedural tool to help himself.
He created a daily scheme in his little book where he organized his time blocks for work, meals, and study. He'd marked down his progress on his virtues.
But the detail that matters most for us is how he framed his day. He began every single day with a potent commitment.
The morning question, what good shall I do this day?
That simple question forced intention. It stopped the mental default of, what do I feel like doing? Or, what's the most urgent fire I need to fight?
And it replaced it with purpose. It gave the entire day a written spine, a sense of direction, before the chaos of reality could take over.
And what's so fascinating is how modern psychology completely validates this old habit. His system wasn't just forward-looking. He also had an evening review.
Right. What good have I done this day?
It served as an early form of closing all the open mental tabs from the day.
And that closing of tabs, that is the key to the modern psychological principle of cognitive offloading.
It really is. When tasks or goals live only in your head, your brain treats them like mental pop-up ads. They just intrude during focused work, during conversations, even when you're trying to sleep.
Because the mind's job is to make sure important goals aren't forgotten. And if there's no concrete plan, it just constantly nags you.
Right. There's this classic concept called the Zeigarnik effect, the idea that people remember unfinished tasks better than completed ones. And while the memory part isn't always supported by the data, the intrusive thoughts from unfinished goals certainly persist.
It impairs your performance on other things.
Totally. The brain demands a plan. There was a study from Baylor University that demonstrated this so vividly. They found that writing a specific to-do list before bed helped participants fall asleep faster.
And not because they were doing the tasks.
No, simply because their mind was convinced it wouldn't forget them when morning came. The act of writing the plan freed up the brain's resources.
That is the power. Franklin stopped trusting his brain as a reliable storage device. He saw it as a leaking bucket, and he started using it strictly as a thinking device.
He recognized that attention is limited, especially under stress. And making a plan reduces that mental noise, freeing up your focus for actual execution.
This intentionality, this idea of structuring your attention, leads us right into the next phase, strategic design.
It's not just about surviving a crisis. It's about proactively cutting the clutter to ensure you have long-term, high-leverage focus.
This is part 3, strategic design, cutting clutter, and breaking down. So we're shifting now from crisis response and historical philosophy to business strategy. We're looking at the research of James Collins, particularly his work studying enduring, successful companies versus the ones that, well, the ones that faltered.
And what he found helps us understand why our daily to-do lists balloon into these overwhelming monsters.
Collins discovered that the companies that failed to achieve greatness often fell victim to what he called the undisciplined pursuit of more.
They chased every shiny opportunity, they expanded into too many non-core markets, and they ended up with these scattered, cluttered agendas that just diluted their time, their energy, and their capital.
They had long, ambitious lists, but the lists lacked meaning because they lacked focus.
I see that in my own week all the time, that feeling that if I'm not constantly adding things to my list, I'm not being ambitious enough. But all it does is create a cluttered agenda that's a mile wide and an inch deep.
And Collins' research showed that the success principle was the exact opposite.
It was concentrated discipline. The most successful companies didn't just stick to their core focus. They actively eliminated unnecessary distractions. They had robust stop-doing lists.
They stripped down their goals to the essential, most impactful actions. Their list had to be a focus tool, not just a passive catch-all archive.
So let's connect this business strategy back to the individual. Why does a cluttered list hurt our brains so much?
It leads directly to a high cognitive cost, specifically something called decision fatigue.
Yes. Every time you look at a flat list of 50 items, your brain is forced to spend valuable energy from your prefrontal cortex just triaging them.
Yep.
You're constantly asking, okay, what should I do now?
That mental exhaustion happens before you even start the actual work.
And it makes thoughtful, high-leverage choices really difficult. It undermines your performance on the few items that actually matter.
So the very act of maintaining a cluttered list drains the resources we need to execute the items on the list.
Precisely. The default habit is to add tasks until you feel productive, until the list represents all your potential. The better habit, the Collins habit, is to consciously and aggressively cut things out until only the highest priority actions remain.
You need the courage to look at task number 17 and say, this is not essential for today's success, and then just cross it off permanently.
This principle of subtraction is crucial. But once we have that focus, we still need a method for tackling truly complex goals.
Right. How do we apply this strategic approach to a big, intimidating project that feels like one single mountain, not a list of steps?
And that takes us to the early struggles of Google and the need for small, measured execution. In the early 2000s, Larry Page and Sergey Brin, they had brilliance, but brilliance wasn't enough to rapidly scale the company.
They were facing massive, complex technical challenges. They realized they needed a systematic approach that went beyond just relying on talented individuals working on their own.
Their solution was a radical divide-and-conquer strategy. They stopped trying to tackle giant problems like perfect the search algorithm in one overwhelming go.
Instead, they broke their approach down into smaller, measurable, achievable tasks and benchmarks, things that could be delegated, executed, and verified daily or weekly.
And this necessity led directly to the development and adoption of the OKR framework, objectives and key results.
The team would set these specific, ambitious goals, the objectives, and then, crucially, break those down into measurable, actionable steps, the key results that could be executed consistently.
The underlying mechanism here is the principle of momentum. When a task feels too large, like rate the annual report, it triggers immediate cognitive overwhelm.
Which translates directly into procrastination.
Exactly. The key is to break everything down into steps that are so small and actionable that they're almost impossible to avoid doing.
So instead of writing write the report, which is just fog, you write draft the introduction's first paragraph.
Or research 3 key statistics for the executive summary. Or build the outline using 5 section headings. You're just trying to create movement.
The goal isn't just to make the project manageable, it's to make every single entry on your list feel possible.
It's what Robert Collier meant when he said, success is the sum of small efforts, repeated day in and day out. You shift your mindset from trying to swallow one daunting goal whole to consistently executing a structured sequence of small, defined efforts.
The structure of the list becomes the engine for your momentum. And this systematic decomposition allowed Google to scale from a small startup to a global powerhouse. It created clarity around what needed to be done right now.
It turns overwhelming ambition into daily execution.
So we've covered crisis management from aviation, reliability standards from medicine, cognitive clarity from space travel, and strategic focus from business. Now let's synthesize all of this.
Let's turn these powerful principles into a practical, actionable system.
This is part 4, building your robust checklist tools, and try this now.
Right. This section is all about combining the best tactics from these high-stakes fields to create a list that truly defends your attention, lowers your error rate, and serves as a reliable operational guide.
We'll start with a lesson from Sully, the principle of hierarchy in crisis, the absolute necessity of the first page.
The tool here is simple, but you have to be ruthless in enforcing it. Create a permanent first-page section at the top of every list you make, whether it's physical or digital.
And this has to be limited, a maximum of 3 to 5 mission-critical items. These are the tasks that define success for the day, and they get done before anything else. Period.
And what about that crucial skill of load shedding? How do we make that a proactive habit?
You have to practice it when you're under pressure. When a crisis hits, a major interruption, an unexpected deadline, a sudden spike of anxiety, your protocol has to be to explicitly and visibly cross out 3 non-critical items from your layer 2.
Don't just ignore them. You have to shed the load consciously. Make the choice visible so your brain knows what it doesn't have to hold on to anymore.
So here's the micro step for you right now. Open your current list, draw a bold, undeniable line near the top, and label that section first page. Now choose 3 tasks, and only 3, that define a winning day and physically move them above that line.
And then commit to starting the very first physical action for one of them immediately after this deep dive is over. That immediate small action is your reboot. It gets you moving toward the most important thing.
Okay, next up, let's leverage the wisdom from the ICU, the principle of reliability and sequencing.
This is about transforming your lift from a suggestion box into a reliable safety system, a contract with yourself.
The best tool for this is the two-column format, do verify. So instead of just listing what you need to do, the list now has a built-in self-audit mechanism.
This is so useful for repeatable, complex tasks, things like project handoffs, emailing sensitive data, or financial submissions.
And you must write your tasks as clear, specific actions, not foggy topics. Instead of budget, write upload revised Q2 budget version 3 to SharePoint and tag the CFO.
And the verify column is where you list your non-negotiable checks, like check, correct file attached, recipient list verified, read email out loud once.
The crucial cultural element from Pranavost's work was that shared contract, the right to call a stop. How do we apply that to ourselves?
You add a stop now rule to your daily regimen. You choose a specific trigger. If I notice myself skipping steps or rushing or multitasking, I stop.
So your immediate micro-step for tomorrow is this. Write out your critical 5 tasks in the physical order you will actually do them. Then add one stop now sentence at the very top.
Something like, if I'm rushing or feel panicked, I will pause, stand up, and read this list out loud once before proceeding. This is your personal cultural revolution against that internal pressure to cut corners.
That brings us to those moments of mental scattering, of exhaustion. And that's where we need the lessons from Apollo 13 and Benjamin Franklin. Reboot and closure.
When your mind is running on low batteries, you need a pre-written sequence to get the system back online.
So write a reactivation checklist. This is a short list, maybe 5 to 9 simple mechanical steps for those scattered moments. These steps have to be low effort and not emotional.
Right. It could be things like clear the desk surface, close all browser tabs, open the first page section of your list, set a 25-minute focus timer, get a glass of water.
The key is that this is not about solving the big problem. It's about starting the mechanical motion of recovery. You're leveraging the stability of that written procedure.
And from the Apollo 13 principle of resource rationing, we also need a decision gate. Add a rule to your list management.
The rule is, if I identify a task that I cannot finish or make measurable progress on in 10 minutes, I must immediately schedule it or break it down into smaller steps.
This prevents you from wasting energy just circling an insurmountable task over and over again.
So your micro-step now. Grab a note card or open a new file titled Restart. Write 7 simple, non-negotiable steps you can follow when you feel scattered, and add a verification line.
Something like, after executing step 3, I can clearly state what specific actionable task I am doing next. This makes sure the procedure is actually leading you back to your first page.
Finally, let's apply the business strategy from Collins and Google Focus and Momentum. We need to cut the clutter and make sure everything is actionable.
The tool here is aggressive prioritization. Use the 80-20 rule to identify the 20% of tasks that produce 80% of your results. And you have to limit your active work list using the top 3 rule for high-priority items at any given moment.
And the most important execution tool is the next action principle. Every single task on your list must be written as the next physical action required.
So instead of the overwhelming reorganized filing system, you must write find first empty binder or draft email to IT about getting more server space.
That transition from a thing to an action is absolutely vital for momentum. A project is intimidating. A single small action is possible.
So your micro step here is twofold. First, pick a project on your list that feels too big and break it into 3 small, actionable steps. One for the next hour, one for the hour after that. Second, look at your current long list and embrace that concentrated discipline. Cross off one thing that simply isn't essential for today's success.
Know that you are gaining focus by subtraction.
We have completed our deep dive into the anatomy of a truly reliable to-do list. And we've seen that the best lists, they aren't just catalogs of your ambition.
They are flight plans for who you can be when the engines go quiet and the pressure is really on.
They are strategically designed reliability systems. They defend your attention from clutter, they lower your error rate by forcing sequencing, and they give your day a written spine that is stable even when your mind is not.
So let's leave you with the final maxims we extracted today from these high-stakes environments.
When time is tight, the first page is the whole list.
When you're depleted or scattered, don't wait for motivation. Let the pre-written procedure restart you.
And simplify your to-do list through aggressive subtraction and you will amplify your success.
We learned that Peter Pronovost discovered the checklist's real power wasn't just in the knowledge it contained, it was in the explicit permission it granted to team members to speak up, to enforce the standard, and to call a hard stop on rushing.
And that permission, it changed an entire culture and it saved lives. It shifted authority from the person with the most seniority to the shared, written procedure.
So here's our provocative thought for you to chew on this week. What is one situation in your professional or your personal life where a clearly written procedure or checklist could grant you, or maybe a colleague or a family member, the permission to call a hard stop on rushing or cutting corners?
And in doing so, prevent a small infection from becoming a large failure.
Use the paper to defend the standard, not just to track tasks,